That means
Which is really like eat room.
Yeah.
We're live.
We're live?
we're live.
Probably live.
We're live now. Your event is started. So.
All right. So, welcome everybody. This is November 2017, Dinner with the Devs with Schell Games. We are enjoying a lovely feast here that we got from Boston Market.
Sponsored by them or something?
No, we didn't sponsor them. We did have to pay Boston Market.
We wish we had Boston Market money.
And so today we have a new batch of devs to talk to you, to answer your questions, whatever feedback you guys have for us, and for you guys to enjoy our conversations. But first and foremost, we're going to get our introductions on the way. So we're going to start on the far side. So John, you want to lean in and introduce yourself?
John Joy, I'm a producer.
Sean Patton, I'm a principal designer here.
I guess it'll be next. Matt Cusick, I'm a senior engineer.
Doyle Daigle, I'm a mid-level UI UX guy.
Michael Lee, I'm an advanced engineer.
River Liu, I'm a programmer intern.
Dan Lin, I'm a data scientist.
Dwayne Waite on the marketing team.
And I'm Chris Hatch, an engineer.
Cool. So what we are going to start our conversation with is just talking about what type of games our devs are playing right now and why they're excited about them, and we'll see how what other people think about what they're playing. So who'd like to start us off?
I mean, if no one else is going to say anything, let's say who.
You good.
Go
I
ahead,
mean,
Matt.
who here's playing Mario Odyssey?
Oh, yeah.
Not me.
Yeah.
You got a few people?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's all about that Mario Odyssey right now.
So good.
So many.
Yes. And I'm excited about it because it's the first 3D Mario I actually like.
Oh, really?
What? The first?
The first.
Really?
Yeah. Wow.
No one's talking.
I never liked the 3D Marios up until this one.
Oh, really?
What's different about this one that you
It
like?
finally controls well. Like, I don't feel like I'm missing stuff that I thought I was going to hit. That was always my problem with them.
I see.
I always felt like I'm fighting the camera more than I'm fighting the game design.
I will also say Mario Odyssey has a surprisingly good two-player mode, where you have like where you have one player controls Mario, but the other player controls Mario's hat, which is a character in this game, Cappy. And it sounds like it wouldn't be that interesting, but it's actually pretty fun.
It makes some things easier.
Yeah, it actually significantly makes the game easier too. So it's good for people who are not as good as Mario, or families especially. But it's just really fun to play in general. So yeah, Mario Odyssey. I'm also been playing that a lot.
I think I've played Mario probably like 15 years. Like,
You gotta practice.
yeah, I mean, I guess is it considered a hard game now? Like, I don't really know.
There are hard missions.
Depends
Well,
on how much you want to do.
Yeah.
I'd say there's different difficulty levels to different Mario games. Like Mario Sunshine, I think it's terrible. Put it out there. That game is just brutal.
I played a side-scrolling one where if you died, you appeared in a bubble.
Oh,
Like,
that's
you didn't
the-
even have to play
That's
the
like
game.
that's
I
like
was
the
like,
new
what is this?
Super Mario Brothers series.
Yeah.
Yeah, the side-scrolling.
Yeah, that's like one of the things they do. Like, I feel like the philosophy right now with Mario is beating the main quest is pretty easy, and then they add the challenges on past and all the post-game sections. And that's also the same with Odyssey. So
And I think it depends on which team, because just like a lot of companies, you have your different teams working on the different types of games.
Yeah.
Like the one that made Odyssey is the same team that made Sunshine back in the day.
It's got their feel.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very, very much feels like Sunshine, only it controls so much better.
I imagine that's like the dev cycles is the reasoning for that. Too.
anyone playing anything that's not Mario?
Trying to beat Witcher 3 again for the second time. Oh yeah, this way. Yeah. Yeah, I played it for 20 hours like 2 years ago, and then I think I gave up. It was too much Witcher, too dense, and then I kind of ran out of games. So I was like sitting around, tried to play that. So I'm playing right now, and it's cool. It's there's a lot there. I think I'm gonna have the same problem I had last time, but I'm trying to power through it. So see how it goes.
I know on Facebook, whenever we asked a bunch of our fans what people were playing, there were quite a few people that tried to get through Witcher during the holiday.
It's like, the problem is I come back like a week or two later, and it's like, if I'm only doing like a couple hours here and there in the game, like, it's gonna take me like 3 years to beat this game.
Do you play Witcher? Does Witcher play you?
I think it's playing me, man.
I'm currently playing Deus Ex 2, Mankind Divided, which is awesome. The story is great. I have the problem of being older with a kid, so I get about like an hour a month to play. So it takes me like a year to finish a single player game, which is why I'm all for. I'm like the only person who is all for games like The Order or what's it called? Hellblade, that are like AAA games that shoot for like a 6-hour completion time, because I can't do a 100-hour campaign.
I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
If it's a story-based game, I want to be able to get through it. Like,
The Order is amazing, and it's 5 hours. It's an amazing story, like amazing graphics, and that's all you need. Like, I don't understand why hours equals better. Like, nothing else gets measured against that.
I
Like,
guess
no one
it's
says this song sucks because it's
monetary,
3
right?
minutes.
Sure, but if you paid, I don't know, I guess $20 for the 3-minute song, you might be like, it wasn't that good.
6 hours at $60 is still better than like most movies. Where
No,
it's
I agree,
2
but like
hours.
not everyone maybe
Yeah.
agrees, right?
And they're all wrong.
well, if they don't agree, they're wrong.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Oh, that's funny. Well, Chris, you've been playing Call of Duty, right?
Yeah, I've been playing World War II. I just got it over last weekend. And by play, I mean stare at walls and textures for like 7 hours. I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh as an art student, and so although I'm an engineer here at Schell now, I love dissecting how a game is structured and what corners they cut to make the poly count, the texture count, how's the texture streaming, all that kind of stuff. So I've had a lot of fun with that, but I've also had a lot of fun with Wolfenstein, the new Colossus. That game is beautiful. But only beautiful if you stand still for 10 seconds, because the RAM on the Xbox cannot handle it, unless you have the Xbox One X. But yeah, I've been playing World War II and Wolfenstein, and both of those are super awesome. But I was particularly impressed with Call of Duty's their lighting system is the first like AAA, like not AAA, but like real next generation lighting that I've seen. It's been possible in things like Unreal Engine and Unity for like 4 years, but now it's actually making it into a game where it's not just like flat diffuse everywhere in the game, and it actually looks really good.
That's sweet. I'm similar, like I'll buy games just to check out like the interface.
Oh, it's terrible. Like I played Destiny 2, and I started staring at walls, but like that's totally like objective based, and you're supposed to like talk with each other and keep working. But I'm like, no, this texture looks really awesome. This plant looks amazing. I think it's only like 4 quads.
They're
But,
gonna,
like,
snipe
I'm
in
like,
the head.
yeah, exactly. I got this. I'm scoping in. I'm like, oh, that is that quad. And it's like, oh, it's terrible. But I have a lot of fun doing that stuff. So.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
funny. How about you, River?
Oh, recently I started to play Assassin's Creed Origins, the new one, and it has a setting in Egypt, which I am a super fan of that. It changed so much from the previous versions, as I can see, like they have this AAA standard style radar thing, like to replace the old minimap. And since it's a new game, it's always fun to find bugs. There are a lot of them, by the way. Yeah, the game is cool. One very impressive thing is the main character has the camel, and they
This is
actually
ancient
make a
Egypt, right?
yeah, it's in
Yeah.
Egypt.
Camel?
So they have a camel.
Camel.
You can
Oh,
mount
camel.
the
Sorry,
camel.
my bad.
Camel.
Ancient Egypt with
Yeah,
Yeah,
cameras.
like,
Camels,
what are
come
they
on.
doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can ride a camel, and they capture the motion of the camel super good, and made it into animation that's just so beautiful to watch. Yeah,
That's
it's a
awesome.
cool game.
You think they mocapped a camel?
Oh yes, they do. What?
They set it up for the sequel, Grand Theft Camel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Motion
Ancient Egypt,
capture.
right?
Ancient
Father.
Egypt, yeah. Yeah, there's some DLC for you. Oh, that's good. I think I saw like one of the Conan's Clueless Gamers playing the Assassin's Creed, and it looked really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing some good stuff there. What about you, Dan?
I've been playing other Nintendo games, Splatoon 2.
Splatoon?
Yeah.
Is it? So what makes
Splatoon
Splatoon 2 different than Splatoon 1? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
It's like the first one, but better.
Is it better?
Incrementing.
I think it's better.
What's better?
So I didn't play the first one as long, but I think with the second one, I think a lot of it is just the updates and then the multiplayer. There's a lot more weapon variation. So Splatoon 2, if people don't know, it's basically like area control. You're painting the area that you're in, and you're basically like this squid kid. So so you're supposed to ink the area you're in, and you can also splat the people that are on the other team. And so they do really creative stuff with the weapons. So like you have like basically like a squirt gun, right? But then you also have like a paintbrush or a roller or a bucket even. So I think the variation in the weapons is super interesting, and just being able to sort of learn like the different styles of the weapons and learning just to play in that kind of mode is very cool.
And you've been playing a lot of the new mode, Salmon Run.
Oh yeah, so that's like a horde mode. So you basically have all these salmons, they're like monster salmons that are trying to kill you.
They look like
But they
salmon.
look like
They kind of look like
giant salmon.
I think they protrude the lower jaw a lot, so it's like a more monster looking, kind of like the Alaskan salmon.
Oh, the Alaskan salmon, of course.
Oh, that's
But
funny.
yeah, so basically you have to kill all these minions, and there's these bosses that pop up. But you're given these 4 random weapons, so you have to sort of, and then each round you get a new weapon, so you're sort of forced to learn these different weapon types. And then a lot of it is just teamwork and just like survival. So sometimes it's down to the last second where you're like basically like, oh, I just need to survive one more second, and like, all the bosses are surrounding you, you're about to die, but it's like, oh, okay, game over, we survived.
Sweet. It reminds me of Zombies Ate My Neighbors.
Uh,
Remember that?
Zombies
Super
Ate My
Speed?
Neighbors.
Super, yeah. Oh yeah.
Man, it's been a long time since. Well, I think it was SNES and Genesis.
Where you had like the squirt guns.
Yeah.
They're like killing monsters and stuff.
Squirt gun games.
It's a great game.
I'm disappointing you guys. No, there's
Well,
LucasArts games too.
Mhm.
we got our first question in.
Oh.
Good to see you, Agnes. Good to see you back. So they're asking, given your experience with the VR, what kind of games do you see forming in this new motion medium? And what dream VR ideas do you have? So who wants to tackle that one first?
Yeah.
Yeah, first part. So what kind of games do you see forming in this, given this new motion medium?
Well, okay, so Skyrim VR just came out like last week, right? I think big open world, like I'm gonna be immersed in VR and not leave my bedroom for like 3 weeks is what it's gonna become. Kind of excited about that, a little scared about it, but I do want to play like Skyrim VR. I think it'd be awesome. Just like I see that place, I'm gonna like go there, you know. So I think super immersive open world stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like there's already sort of been almost like 2 codified genres in VR. There's like you're in a cockpit room sort of seat VR games, and then there's also I can't think of a better term, but sort of the job simulator-esque, like, it's fun to interact with things in VR.
Yeah,
and
sure.
it's like there's a ton of interactions all within hand reach.
Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff right now. I'm aware that it might not go past it, right? Like, that's why I think like a real game like Skyrim, like more big. Well,
Until
I mean,
you
like,
go for everything else.
Amateur hour.
So all these fake games.
Fake games.
I mean, like a big
Big
budget
game.
title, I guess. You know.
So fake.
Yeah, as the medium gets more and more proven, the bigger budget,
The investment, right?
To get longer games, you need bigger budgets, right?
Yeah.
They're having a hard time funding those games not in
And yeah, no, I know,
Mhm.
but it's exciting to see.
So did Skyrim solve the throw-up factor? Like if you're,
Well, not really. They sort of punted it.
Yeah.
So
but I mean,
you
do you
can
teleport? Like,
you can
still-
teleport or walk.
Ah.
So it's
Yeah,
kind of like
I
up
was
to
gonna
you,
ask that
right?
too, if they
You ship a
teleport.
bag with it.
Yeah, basically.
Just a
Just
street
straps
bag,
on.
yeah.
So you have the option to walk with analog sticks.
Yeah, you can walk,
or
yeah.
the trackpad or
Oh
whatever.
my gosh.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but
That's
Henry
cool.
doesn't get sick. He's the type of guy just
I
sitting there all
had
day.
Jeff playtest my Jam Week thing, and he was fine. He was using the sticks until I disabled him. Like,
That's
it's
nuts.
interesting. Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah, I was wondering, it's like
I
open
can't do
world,
it
like
either.
it's just tap A to teleport
Yeah,
to
The
the
worst
next
is
Basically,
time
yeah.
people forgetting to take out the head bob. That's like instant
Oh,
bob.
yeah.
That's
terrible, yeah.
I remember Skyrim being a roller coaster.
You're just like, oh god, why am I getting motion sickness?
I'm intrigued because they also released Doom.
Yeah, they did Doom and
VR.
Fallout
Oh,
as well.
yeah.
And Fallout VR.
Fallout is also
Well,
going to be VR.
Doom is the interesting one because you gotta move
So-
fast.
oh,
in
that's
that
so
game.
fast paced.
Yeah, I saw some of that screen. I was like, goodness, you're moving.
Yeah,
That's-
no,
Yes,
I
to
did-
this person's point.
Yeah, so basically Ready Player One.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, notice in the book Ready Player One, they never really describe how they move. You ever notice that? I wonder
Yeah.
how they're going to handle that in the movie.
Teleporting.
They haven't really shown it in the movie.
Well, they're just gonna
trailers
make
yet
it
either.
like you're in there, right? So there's
Yeah.
gonna be people walking around like people are walking.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like they're gonna.
I'm ready for like Existence. You ever see that movie?
Yeah.
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 Plug
I've been
into your
playing.
spine.
I mean, that's what we
That's
need,
the way
right?
to
In
do
order
it.
to get this to be actual real, you just need to plug right into your
Yep.
brains.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You won't get motion sick if your brain thinks you're actually.
You gotta override your
Kind of like
ears.
this reality. You
Gotta
know?
override your ears.
Just
Yeah.
walk around $20.
How do you know you're not in there right now?
I've been playing
Oh, no.
some abstract puzzle games, so it's sort of like Monument Valley was on the iPad. Like
Mhm.
I played Luna and some Form.
Is
in
that a VR game? Oh.
Yeah, they're both VR games, and they both actually. It was funny. I played Form first, then I played Luna. They both involve puzzles where there are a bunch of dots connected by lines, and you have to move some of the dots to some of these other dots while
Mhm.
still keeping the lines untangled. But like they both had that same puzzle, and I was like, what's going on?
Playing the same game. Oh, wait,
but
no,
it's
this
like
isn't.
basically it's these like three-dimensional
Mhm.
spatial puzzles,
That's cool.
which is cool.
Yeah. I like in VR the scale. Like, I want to see more space sims. Like, I want a giant planet in
Yeah.
front of me, and I want it to feel like it's huge.
That's Google Earth VR.
No, I know, but I want more.
Dodge.
Have you done Google
Yeah,
Earth?
yeah, I have
yeah,
an
kid,
Oculus
but
at home, but
yeah.
I want to fly around,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Well, that's the
And they
thing
just
about-
let you look at it.
That's the crazy thing about like actual space travel. It's actually you need
Takes
that
forever.
fake,
Yeah.
right? Like, 'cause everything's really boring because you don't have anything
I
around.
love
you.
it, though.
I just want Super Punch Out in VR. I think that would be
That'd be
awesome.
cool, yeah. Well, someone made a game like that, but it's kind of goofy, right? Conan played that on one of those.
Is it
For what?
Like a boxing game.
Ready to run
But
a
it's
boxing
not as.
Just, yeah.
I want the big cartoony characters.
Yeah, that'd be
with,
sweet.
like,
Huge gloves.
Yeah.
So, I guess where, like, do you think Skyrim VR is just going to be like that next big thing in VR, or like? So, like,
Yeah,
I
something
guess
like
my question is, are there bigger questions in VR that still need to be solved that people just aren't tackling?
The motion stuff.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
there was shit around the office a couple weeks ago. The Oculus did some research in that, and they released that, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's public.
Yeah.
It's public.
That looked kind of interesting. Like, they're horrible solutions, I think, for a game you want to play, because it's like showing a lot of your environment, almost like an AR solution or something.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe there's something there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
Couple
AR
more
might
years.
actually be the bridge.
Right.
I think VR is like it's difficult to get over some of those issues. So I think AR is that bridging technology that more and more people will get because things like phones and stuff are taking control of that space.
And an important thing, so I guess, like with AR is AR because you are seeing into the actual world, especially if it's a pass-through AR solution, you have grounding. So then usually the caveats with VR is like it needs to be really high performance, it needs to be at least minimum 90 frames a second, preferably much higher than that. But with AR, you don't need to worry about that. I mean, you want better performance, obviously, but if you have to deal with the game running in 30 frames a second in AR, you don't get sick from it. It doesn't look great, but you don't get sick, and it doesn't cut out. There's already like, what's that stat, like, there's already like 10% of people who can never do VR, basically, just because of the fact that they're so thrown off.
The people that get sick just like driving a car or reading or
Yeah.
something, they're not gonna have a good
90%
time.
of the people
You
can't
read
afford
while
it, so-
driving?
Yeah.
So what do you say?
I think that's dangerous.
Yeah.
More dangerous than VR.
That's something. Can we talk about Jedi?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Go for it.
That's something we noticed in the game Jedi Challenges, which came out a few weeks ago, and we worked on the dueling component with that. And a big part of that game is like you're fighting, you're fighting a Star Wars villain, and they're appearing within the game, but then you're seeing the real world environment around you, and so even though it's an AR game, you don't feel. You can still see everyone who's around you. You can see your environment that you're playing in, and it makes the thing feel really seamless. So.
Got another question up here.
Yeah, so do you guys, so if you think, AR, to Matt's point, is going to be that bridge, what dream AR games would you guys like to make?
Yeah, Mike T just posted it. I think, at least for me, like working on Jedi Challenges was awesome. So.
We've already made our dream AR
Yeah,
game.
done, man. We're retired.
Downhill from here.
I think it's one of X Lab's partnerships, but I love the idea of, I think they're pairing with someone where it's basically like, it's warehouse laser tag, but when you have
Yeah.
the system on, you think you're fighting in like the Death Star against stormtroopers. And
Yeah.
I feel like that as like an outing activity sounds awesome. Like
The Void, they do the VR mix.
Oh, the Void,
Yeah, there's sort
And
of.
that is, I want to try that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he
I
uses,
want to try that too.
and he uses virtual reality headsets, but it's technically still augmented reality in a way that the physical world is still interacting with
Mhm.
your virtual world, because
Mhm.
there's the actual props that you
And the
touch.
doors and
yeah,
stuff,
the
yeah.
doors open, you can pull levers, you can do all this stuff, and it's matched one-to-one in the VR. That's super cool.
I'd love to see more people exploring taking table games and things like miniatures and stuff,
Yeah.
and making
Yeah.
them like a lot more rich and
Mhm.
cheaper. Because that's one of those few things where
Right.
making it digital actually makes it more affordable.
Mhm.
Like, I'd love to play Warhammer. I don't have that kind of money or
Yeah.
time
What
to
the
like
rules? Like if
Yeah.
I could have like
Yeah.
my stats like appear in front of me
Yeah.
and the health of my unit, and like, because you spend 3 hours looking at your book. Like,
Yeah.
You can spend
30 minutes
$30
later.
on an AR solution for like a miniatures game, and it would be way cheaper than the actual physical game.
Yeah. I think for me with the AR solution is I really just want the dream AR headset or hardware, because I don't think the hardware is there yet. But I think my ultimate dream for AR would be like you put on a pair of glasses that just look like sunglasses, and then your entire world happens to be augmented with digital information. And there's a couple companies that are secretly haven't published anything because they're probably not anywhere close, but that are trying to do that. But I think once that's there, I think almost any regular game would seem just like virtual reality. Everybody wants to make just that same thing, but in VR. I think that'll happen to AR as well. But the tabletop stuff is really good, and I think the AR Core and AR Kit that have come with phones recently are going to get us pretty close to that because it gives us that viewport. But I think my dream would be the ultimate interaction would be like your hands just interact with things, and there's a couple of companies like Leap Motion and other things that have tried to do that kind of stuff. But if you were able to have a tabletop, you have characters, and you can just put your hand out in front of your AR headset, and actually you're picking stuff up and dropping it, I think that would be the kind of dream.
Basically like real life holograms.
Yeah, basically real life holograms, but obviously without them just existing there, you'd have to have something on your face covering your eyes, or a glove that you're wearing, but that would be my dream.
Cool.
Yeah.
What are you thinking, Sean?
The
Hit you up.
well, no. So when the Vive came out, they had the lab, and then you open that drawer and you see that little world in there, right? And I know a lot of people at Schell are excited about sort of simulations of little worlds, and like just having that, like, you know, it's just like always on my desk, or like always on my kitchen table at home, or always, you know, somewhere. It's like when I walk by, I can like see what they're doing and like interact with them, and like it's just sort of always there, and they're doing stuff on their own, like. And I come home and they've like invaded my living room, and I'm like, oh, guys, get out of here.
It's like
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
virtual
It's like
pets.
virtual
Oh my God.
ants.
Yeah.
Virtual exterminator.
Oh no.
Gotta have my house sprayed for gnomes, virtual gnomes again. Gosh.
That's a crazy idea. You could have like a Pokemon as your pet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have to
Yeah.
clean up any
Tamagotchi,
poop,
but
you
way
know?
cooler.
Tamagotchi.
Yeah.
is way
Yeah.
cool.
Tamagotchi AR.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think there's a lot of space outside of games where this is going to really take off
Oh, yeah.
more, right? Like things like architecture and medicine.
Mhm.
Like, I think those are the things that are going to drag the technology industry along while the entertainment space is finding their footing. Hopefully,
Yeah.
the entertainment side of it does find their footing. That's the key.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened with the Kinect. The Kinect like failed as a game device, but it lives on in robotics industries. I worked at a robotics company before Schell, and we used Kinects all over that thing. It wasn't actually the Kinect, but it's the same technology.
Yeah.
I think that's happening with VR right now, and it's also going to happen with AR for sure. Like the HoloLens, like their entire business model is like selling to like industry non-entertainment games, but then we're just going to get all of that in a nice packaged up headset without having to spend the money to develop it. So
Similar with iPad, it's actually like
Yeah.
losing marketplace as a media device, but it is everyone's
used
cash
as-
register, and it is how doctors check in, and
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
amazing how that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, cool. So, I had a question about the AR VR market, so we kind of already, went into that, which is really cool. But I want to switch gears a little bit from some of our other social media channels. They always are asking how not only how you guys got into games, like how'd you get into the video game industry, but also if, like, for Chris, for example, he just said that he worked for a robotics company. So if you weren't developing games, where would you probably be?
Sad.
That'd be dead.
Okay, so Doyle was video game industry or bust.
Kinda. I mean, well, you went to AIP, that's
Yeah.
where I went to.
Yeah.
You're in the game program.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I went for art and design.
Okay, yeah.
That was my
Same here.
degree. So it's a one kind of path
Yeah, it's
forward. So like if that failed, it'd be like, what other degrees can I get? Like
I've seen some things at gas stations, man. So you lucked out.
not that there's anything wrong.
No, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
great. But you don't want that debt.
So I can actually answer this,
Yeah.
because before I worked in the game industry, after so my background is in computer science. So I actually was a web developer for a while, and I was doing websites, especially around the late 2000s, like 2007 through 2012, basically. So you're getting a lot of like rise of blogs, WordPress, first integration with social media. It was sort of cool. It's sort of neat. Web development moved. It's funny, people always say game development moves fast. That's nothing compared to web development.
I
Is
know.
ridiculous. Web development changes.
Web framework of the month.
Yeah, web framework of the month. Like I lived in a time where we went from like Java backends to PHP to Python to Ruby.
To
All-
Ruby,
yeah, and then back and forth, and whatever things are. So I was in that industry for a while, doing a lot of freelance, doing a lot of contract work, and I'd always been I've told this before, but I always really wanted to make games, and games is something, especially around that time with independent games, was becoming really much more viable to just get into making games by yourself. It was like early Game Maker, a lot of Flash games, that sort of thing. And so that's how I started making games. And I'd always sort of been doing like small hobbyist stuff on the side. And I went back to school to Carnegie Mellon and the Entertainment Technology Center to get a degree in making games, essentially. And now I work here at Schell. So,
What year did you graduate ETC?
2013.
Okay.
So
It's funny to hear people say that, because like I feel like that's changed at that department a bit.
Yep.
Because like if people don't know, a lot of people at Shell went through that program. But like I think back when Sean was a student there, and when I was, it wasn't really like a games thing. It was just like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like crazy technology, weird things.
Yeah.
department.
I mean, definitely a lot of the graduates. So I graduated in 2003, and this is the Carnegie Mellon's Entertainment Technology Center. And I think people were like, it was like 1/3 or a little more went into 3D movie, making,
Yeah.
computer-generated
Yeah.
movies, animated movies. 1/3 maybe did video games, and then 1/3 was like miscellaneous, right? Like
Things like
museum exhibits
Yeah.
and or theme parks
right.
or
Some gas stations in there.
probably
Probably.
banking software, that sort of thing.
The fun stuff.
But yeah, it was a mix, and now it's definitely.
It seems like it's very
definitely
focused on
the
Yeah.
game,
Either you're going to Pixar with animation, you're doing some sort of 3D or 2D animation or games.
Yeah.
Particularly, yeah.
Yeah, before going into games and entertainment, I was a teacher, middle school and high school. art teacher, an art history teacher, so I'm gonna get a little trippy, but I do feel like I don't think there is. For me, there was no plan B, because I love teaching. There was nothing wrong with teaching, and it was a great job, and I worked at an awesome private school. But there's always this kind of like low grade, like something doesn't feel right. So I feel like right now I don't feel that. So I feel like I'm in the right industry with the right career, and I feel like everyone has that. And I feel like what people tend to do is just live with that low grade agitation. And I feel like if you listen to it and you steer, I have a family, and I come from the Northeast where it's like you should be a lawyer or a banker or a doctor, and like, but then I hear people like, but I like writing short stories, but that's a crazy idea. And like, this is a crazy, like producing games like is insanity. So like, it's not necessarily like viable. I don't know if it's a good choice or not, but like if I dive into it head first, it's like it's working and it will continue to work. So I don't know. For me, I just think if people listen to your inner voice, and if it's saying to go for whatever you want to go for, like the doors will open, you will find a way in. And I just know I couldn't live with that, even as awesome as teaching was and my students were. And I couldn't ignore that kind of like
That
feeling that I
urge.
was missing. Yeah, I was missing out on like my true calling.
Very cool.
I worked in educational games for like 7 years at an educational company, and we just made like really bad Flash games. And, we made games in Torque. If you guys remember Torque.
Torque.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Those are Crystal Dynamics guys.
Yeah, the engine didn't work and it died, and our games died with it. That was that.
Very optimistic.
Yeah, like Flash. Yeah, that too. We had to remake all those games in HTML5. That was kind of a theme at that place. And so I did that for a while, and then did consulting in the corporate world for a brief stint, and that was interesting. Very different.
Yeah.
You know, there's some cool people, some people that they're all about like just sales or whatever, and that's fine. But it was not my vibe, and so I really wanted to get back into games, and that's why I applied here when it opened up. And yeah, really happy. It's an awesome place.
Very cool. I guess for me, they're a little bit similar to John. Before joining Schell, I taught as well. I taught at a high school down in Charlotte, North Carolina, teaching marketing, sports entertainment marketing, and marketing management. And before teaching, I was in the startup, fashion, sector in Charlotte with my own marketing company. And whenever we moved back to Pittsburgh, I was like, though I love teaching, teaching was fun, the kids were awesome, I love that aspect of working, with the youth, very similar. It's like I need to get back in there, like I need some other type of, fulfillment, and, Schell had an opening. Now, to Wackness, he has a question. Does attending the ETC help your chances? Who would like to take that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, like, I want to say no right off the bat, but like,
I don't know. I would say yes from my perspective. I think.
see, that's like the weird thing, right? It's like only because it's here.
Yeah.
Like, even
Well, and-
attending Pitt would help your chances, right? Like,
But the internships, I think, is what
we have an intern. We got
Yeah.
our interns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might
River.
be more just.
I mean, I'm currently a ETC student.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's an experience.
It's part of like what you know, right? Like,
Right.
Jesse teaches there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, he'll know people.
Yeah,
And if he knows that you're good at something, or you're.
I will say, like, having gone to the ETC as well, I was the same year as Mike, but just being able to work together with teams of different disciplines,
Yeah.
and then coming to Schell is almost like the graduation of that, where like, oh, now you're actually working in teams of different disciplines, but it's basically, it's very similar. So in terms of just like the experience of working with different people, I think ETC definitely gives that experience.
Yeah, they're focused on interdisciplinary teams working on like real projects for like relatively long periods of time, given college projects. But I think that's the best way. Now, I have kept data on these numbers over the years.
Nice.
When Schell was first, we were
99%.
like the 50% or more. But I think my last maybe a year ago I checked and we were like 25%.
Yeah, it's
UTC
dropping.
grad. So it's definitely
Oh, wow.
dropping.
Yeah, we're spreading out.
Yeah,
I thought it was way higher.
No, it's not. It's not.
If you have good stuff, you have
Really?
good stuff.
I feel like
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Where are you getting your numbers?
I got my ways.
Yeah, well, oh, sorry, go on.
No, I'm done.
I was gonna say, also, if you're wondering about what the philosophy is of bringing people into Schell Games, we did a blog series called Visit with a V, and each one of them talks about what they look for in hiring, what type of characteristics they want for the team. So that will give you a better idea from hearing straight from the leadership of what they're looking for. And yeah, that's just on our blog.
I'd like to point out as well, though, like, back when Sean was a student at DTC, there was like 20 students.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, a few
They're
people.
all here.
Right, that's crazy. From Sean's class, it was Sean.
Just curious somebody.
I
Yeah.
think, right? It was just you.
Yeah, just me.
And
See,
then-
one person.
And, like, I think there was a higher percentage. Like, now there's like 100 some students in the
No,
department.
it's
No,
not.
it's
They
74.
keep it
It's
to, yeah, they
74
keep it
though.
to 70
It was,
to 80.
my year was around 80, and it's
Oh,
dropped a little.
yeah.
Right? So, like, you know, you get a couple people, like, there's so many ETC, well, compared to me. Like, I'm thinking about back when it was like 30 people and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
The percentage is actually pretty low about, like, the number of people from ETC to, like, flow into Schell.
Yeah, I would say if you have the skill set, being from ETC or anywhere else won't make a difference. But I think the main reason we've seen such an influx of ETC is that our CEO Jesse, he is from ETC, so he has contacts at ETC, and people at ETC have him as a contact. So when they have students, they are able to reach out to Jesse directly because they know him, and say, hey, do you have internships? Do you have this? And they have a much more higher pressure and more presence or like exposure to getting in here because he's from ETC. But if you yourself are saying, I need to go to ETC to get a job at Schell, that's not true at all.
No,
I would say
actually-
you get your name in the door a little easier maybe, but there's nothing stopping you, especially nowadays, from just jumping online, finding an email address from somebody here, a VP, or even Jesse himself, or find him at a conference and being like, hey, what's going on? This is what I do. Show off your work. Yeah, I don't think yeah.
I mean, there's a public, on the website, it's a public place to
Exactly, yeah.
to supply
Yeah.
information about yourself. So
Yeah.
And LinkedIn.
Yeah, and one thing that I've found that really helps in this industry is actually knowing people, like building your network. Because, like, I mean, I worked my butt off to get here, but it did help that I knew like some people, right? Like,
that's a big part of college and even grad
Yeah.
school, right?
Yeah.
Like, people think of it as learning, but like a large part of education is getting to know your fellow classmates who are going to move on to other things, and like those relationships will matter a
Yep.
lot in
Yeah.
the future.
And prove yourself every step of the way, because like you may think that one person isn't paying attention, but you might run into them 5 years later, and they might remember that, oh wait, they were actually a really good teammate, they really did their work, they were high quality, quick to respond, good to work with, kind, like all that kind of stuff. Every little person matters. And I think going to conferences, if you have the money, which you probably won't if you're a student, but if you can make your way to a conference, I wouldn't say GDC because that's way too expensive,
Yeah.
but there's smaller local conferences, either game engine conferences or just producer conferences, even if you aren't a producer or something like that. Like, go to those and network, and then you never know what'll come up.
Yeah, I got a small story about networking that like still like I think it's key to where I am right now, and that's back in undergrad I had a professor who over the summer would teach like weird little experimental classes that she was playing around with, and she would do it over the summer semester until like she had more freedom. It was a class in which it was interlinked between the CS department and the art department, and students from both departments would get together to build a VR world. And I went to that class. I think I did a decent job in it. You can ask her. But in the end, I ended up having to do a fair amount of programming because the programmer ended up dropping the class and all this other stuff. Fast forward years later, and I'm out of college at essentially the bust of all the technology bubble. And like it's impossible to find decent jobs. It was kind of a mess back in like early 2000s. I decided to apply to the ETC. I asked for a recommendation from my professors, that one specifically, and ends up that class that I took was based off of Randy Paus's research for the class BBW at ETC. She was in contact with him a lot during that time for that class, and my work in that specific class became, I think, a straight through line for me getting the eye of Randy to get into the ETC, which then ended up me meeting Jesse through all that stuff and get here. So it's like that one single class and how I acted in that one class affected my entire life.
And it's like
Wow.
three people disconnected and all that. Like, yeah.
And I will say that I actually didn't get my foot in the industry. I got a paw in the industry of I was living in Tiburon, California, walking my dog, and I have a very weird dog, and there was another very weird dog.
Good story already.
Yeah. And I found out the person walking the dog was the wife of the owner of a post-production studio in San Francisco. So we bonded over our dogs. Our dogs are still best friends, and I interned with him, and then that was like, that built my experience that then led to an internship at Nickelodeon, which then, blossomed into my career. So like, what I thought was a curse of this annoying dog that like couldn't meet any other dog, the one dog he did get along with was my foot in the industry. So
On the industry, man.
Dog,
So to get a job,
doggy
weird dog equals job.
That's
That's what it
what I
is.
got.
The
now.
thing I'm getting here is you never know. Like,
you never
Never
know.
know.
life
Never.
throws at you opportunities and doorways you never think are going to lead to different places.
The one thing that's like the common thread is that none of us knew that was going to be the connection. Like when you're saying like, what do I need to do to get in the industry? Like you're not going to know the one thing that's going to get you in that door. Like you just have to do everything you can to be the best you can at what you're trying to do, and that those connections will find you along the way.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
I wanted to talk about what this person said real quick about like having done this stuff and working on different things. Like when I was at a educational company, like we were making games, but it wasn't like a big game industry job, right? And like we weren't doing any large scale games, and so for me to get, I didn't have any experience for my resume, so like it's like screw it, like let's just make an indie game. So me and my friends made an indie game, did pretty well. We won some awards and stuff, and that for me was like a really nice portfolio piece that I had that didn't cover my job. It was just a thing we made. So I think that's a thing you can do, right? Like
Yeah,
you don't
I think
have
that's
industry.
how I first met Doyle, just he was showing off his game.
Oh yeah, that's right. We met well before, and like Mike Liu and some other guys.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, neat.
Yeah, what was the name of your game?
Crowman and Wolf Boy. It's on iOS.
Chrome.
Is it still out?
You know,
What?
Yes.
I
Is it
remember
still
you
out?
talking
I gotta
about
look
that.
Chrome, say,
Crowman and Wolf Boy.
in Wolfborg.
It's a weird game.
Is it paid for?
Story
Well,
of-
we
Do I have to give you
were
money?
nominated. We were in the indie showcase at Patsy's, which was pretty cool.
Nice.
No way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
Is there a sequel in the works?
Nah, we didn't make enough money.
Yeah.
Cool.
You find out that he's a werewolf, so it's a werewolf boy in the sequel.
Yeah, look at this.
Ooh.
Oh, man, Wolf
Could be
Boy.
Wolf Man in the sequel.
Well, it's Crow Grandpa and Wolf Man. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like God of War
The next
4.
generation.
Oh, Baron, good to see you again. What was the answer to the Dream VR project question? Who wants to summarize that?
all these I think
Skyrim and
Doyle wants Skyrim.
and I want plugs into my spine.
Done. Matrix Skyrim.
Plugsinthespine.com. I'm going to reserve that right now.
Skyrim Matrix Edition.
Wow!
Oh!
What? Whoa!
There's a connection.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. You
there you
helped
go.
make my game not suck.
Whoa.
And that's weird because that means we probably met.
You want me to give you $4 for your game?
Is it really $4?
I think so. Is this it?
Yeah, that's it.
That's it? I mean, it looks
It's
cool.
a good game, man.
That's pretty cool.
Wait. How many hours of gameplay?
How many hours of gameplay for this?
How
The
many
world, hard-earned
There's
dollars.
a reason with that.
I can get half a cup of coffee for that.
Incredible. Is this worth a Starbucks coffee?
That's a small pumpkin
That's
spice
really-
latte.
See now
It's
for
about $1 an hour, actually. That's not
Pumpkin
bad.
spice.
oh, that's not bad.
I mean, I'm not saying $4 is a lot. Just
So now we'll have to do a let's play with Crowman and Wolf Boy.
Oh,
absolutely.
Well, live stream.
That would be
That would be
interesting.
awesome.
That'd be good.
That would be awesome.
That'd be fun. No, it's just so interesting hearing about there's so many people here who have done their own games or their board games. It's just very interesting to hear about backgrounds. And then what's Baron saying? Vive is apparently supporting brain-controlled VR startup. Well, yeah, Vive just poured in a lot of money in their Vive X. They put in funding for, I think, 36 startups.
Wow.
really?
In the past
Like an
couple of
incubator?
days.
Is it like an incubator? Okay.
So if that's what you're talking about, Baron, I saw that news, but I didn't read into which companies they were.
I'm curious. Is that like the brainwaves thing? That one that had like, there was one where you could like strap it onto your head, and then it was basically like you had to focus, and then a ball would move, and it was like magnets under the table, and it would move it back and forth. And the idea was it was 2-player on either side, and you just had to concentrate on the ball. You had to train it first. It was like a minute training or something like that.
Yeah.
You trained it that this is what I mean when I say ball, and then or move forward, and this is what I mean when I say move backwards. It records your brain, and then you can move it back and forth, which was really cool. But I wonder if it's similar.
It's nice to know that Valve's pointing their money hose at different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do.
Money
It's
hose.
like that,
What are you talking?
They
They're
take
just
digital hats, turns it into money, and then out the other side they just point it.
Someone needs to blast me with that hose, man.
Oh man.
Crates for Dota and
Yeah.
I do love though that like brain control VR is not like a joke or a manga.
It's an honest question.
It's like a
Yeah.
real thing that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
Right, like-
what we saw, we're like, oh yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
yeah, you know this thing. Dude, it's like,
because you won't need to jack in anymore. It'll just be like electrodes, or they already have.
Yeah.
That's how you read brainwaves. It's not like they're
Mhm.
going into your skull or anything.
Well, this is Pittsburgh. You take the brain-controlled VR. You take the self-driving cars.
Yep.
You got these just like huge road
Human
trips.
tanks.
yeah, you throw a robot arm on it.
I was thinking video games while I'm on a road trip.
Oh,
But
but
human
sure.
tanks is good too.
Yeah, just get after it. Why not?
Well,
Just
no.
go all in.
Dude,
But
if
that-
the military
that-
gets a hold of this, man, it's terrifying.
But if you hook the self-driving car up to the VR though to like simulate the motion, then you get all these cars driving crazy on the highway. But that's bad. You don't want that.
Or do you and just not drive?
You need a closed circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man.
You're playing leapfrog. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Wow, this is so real. Just like jumping through the street.
It's like driving on I-95.
Yeah, seriously. I-95 is crazy. You take your life in your own hands whenever you drive I-95.
Sorry, this is it's fresh wounds. It took me 3 hours longer to get home from Thanksgiving break. This time. It went from a 9-hour trip to a 12-hour trip because of I-95.
Wait, I-95 where?
I hate that road so much.
Massachusetts?
Yeah, I mean, I-95 to everywhere. Just the whole highway. It's just
Yep.
brutal. Like trying to drive that. I drove in one year through DC, and I got, which is just a terrible idea. Like, why drive around Washington DC? That's just, I just wasn't thinking at all.
Go west.
Yeah, seriously.
Any amount.
Then I got onto, I think, 495. I was like, oh, I'll avoid Washington, D.C. No, dead ends right into the Washington Monument. So I'm like, how did I get here? What? It took me the hour to go back. Oh, it was just awful.
It's traffic with a view. You got the monument. You're like, okay, I'm gonna stare at this for an hour.
I made a mistake once in New York. Somehow I was on a highway and then all of a sudden I was in Brooklyn. I'm like, oh, what did I do?
Well, a lot of times the phone's like, yeah, that's the quickest way. Go right across Manhattan. And I'm like, this isn't the quickest way.
There's no way this is
There's
right.
taxis all around me. Ah.
All right. Let's see, any general thoughts on advice or giving or designing or creating a VR game? Is moving a player's camera without them moving a big no-no?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
See, here's my thoughts on this. I think
There you
that,
go.
no, I think that right now,
video games.
yes,
Yeah.
it is. But in 10 years, kids who grew up with all this VR stuff, it's not gonna be a big deal.
I think so.
I think
So
so.
the next generation's
Yeah,
gonna be okay with it.
children-
Their inner
Yeah.
ears will develop differently.
Actually, that's not how that works. Because I get super motion sick, and my girlfriend's getting her PhD in that stuff, and I asked her, and she's like, no.
What do you mean?
So what is it?
What?
Well, explain
Yeah,
it.
explain
Like-
it.
Yeah. That would
Not
be
that.
What is it?
No, I don't know what it is. It's not a brain, it's your brain.
Bring her in and she would like. I
Next
wanna know.
dinner with the devs.
She could
Yeah.
make a ton of money in this
Or-
industry.
Yeah,
She
bring her
could
in.
be like a C student and be wrong. So
It's true. I would never.
he may not be right.
How reliable are you, Doyle's girlfriend?
If you ask me about
Bring your
economics,
knowledge.
I'm very wrong about all.
No, but I think for VR to succeed long term, it has to sort of like humans got to evolve past it, or else like the games are just too simple. And it's not gonna
Either
stick.
humans
Yeah.
or technology.
They'll have some medication or something that'll disconnect.
Maybe, yeah.
I'm trying to be
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
You got like an hour before you fall
You
asleep.
just get a drip IV.
Yeah, they all have that symptom. It's like you fall asleep. It's like, yeah, I'm not motion sick because I'm unconscious.
Yeah.
like challenge. Like, oh my
Dream VR.
That'd be terrible.
Yeah.
You wake up, see some horrible stuff.
Oh, that would be terrifying.
Make a VR Nightmare on Elm Street game where
That'd be cool.
the boss battles happen when you fall asleep.
Oh man.
Oh, no,
I think it's like in a
no.
pill form somewhere.
Sounds like- what about
Oh, man.
Is it-
VR Kevin Bacon?
If you detect your pulse and actually
Yeah.
trigger stuff while you're asleep.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I mean, they did make the Friday the 13th game, right? Like,
They
I
did?
can see that being like it's a pretty slow-paced game. I'd be interested
Not
to see
VR
that.
though, right?
No,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
what I mean.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm curious to see if they could pull that off in VR because like even Jason like teleports and stuff like that. Like,
Mhm.
it-
Yeah.
Yeah, I think right now the simplest way, without actually putting too much thought into it, is teleporting, which is why it's kind of everywhere in games. It's like it snaps you there so that you technically didn't move. There's some techniques with vignetting in so that your line of sight is narrower, so there's less moving in your peripheral, which is what seemingly causes more motion sickness. But an interesting one, I went to the Unite conference a couple months back, and the Rick and Morty VR experience was a really good implementation. It was teleporting, but the idea was that you had a play space. So if you were standing in the play space and you wanted to move to the next play space, you could just teleport to the new play space. It's a little hard to explain, but you had your place and where you were standing was real, and when you went to the next space, you were in the same place relative to the play space. Does that make
So
sense?
zone-based teleporting.
It's zone-based teleporting, and so when you stepped in there, you knew exactly where you were going to be, and it's not that you're teleporting where you are, you're standing in the same like kind of space, but then what's around you is different. So it sounds a little bit
It's the
like-
equivalent of instead of moving, the environment around you, like the walls around you are changing. Like they're pulling away the room, putting you back in, so you're in the
Exactly.
exact same physical.
Yeah, but your
space and the-
but your barriers are the same, so that leaves players to walk around more freely because where they're walking around, that wall never changes. So they never end up actually walking outside of the bounds. The problem with the common version of teleporting is that when they teleport there, if they walk 2 feet forward, what previously was open space, they could be right up against the wall. And now, although in real world they can walk 2 feet ahead of them, they can't in the virtual space, and you end up with this weird mismatch. Doing the zone-based stuff, you can spawn in, and you'll always have the same space you had previously. So if your back was to a wall, if you go to the next zone, your back's against the wall again. I don't know if that made any sense, but that one I thought was a different tweak, but a seemingly really good one. So
We did some guys here made a cool game with that last year, Jam Week.
Entirely possible.
The shooter.
What's that?
The game that people made that was awesome.
Take your
All
word
of
for
it?
Anyway, it was a sweet game.
Yeah.
And it did that. And you teleported around and it was pretty awesome.
It's interesting. So you mentioned the vignetting in, and
Yeah.
and so building virtual worlds, which is this class at CMU. I was recently on their jury. Basically, every year they have like 81 worlds, and then the class votes, and they get it down to 35, and then there's a jury, and the jury sort of takes it to the 14 worlds that are going to be in the show. And thinking back on that, because when I was in that class in 2001. The head mounts that we had were magnetically tracked, and their resolution was 320 by 240 for each eye.
Yeah.
crisp.
And the frame rate, you were lucky if you got like 25, 30.
Wait,
And
mine was last year that you
the field of view was so narrow. But like I made a game in that where you're like river rafting down this canyon, and like thinking back on it, I was fine. I never got sick.
It's because it was
And
so
I think
bad.
It's so, yeah, it's so bad. Like there's no
Your brain
periphery.
has no
Yeah.
way to
That
think of
it's,
this.
field of
it's
view is
just
so
strange to think
small
about. Like we've
that-
gotten some things are so much better that you don't get motion
Yeah.
sickness just sitting there. Because we would get like
Can't
headaches
really push
Yeah.
it.
just
Yeah.
being in VR back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now you don't get the headaches just being there, but you do get more of the.
Oh, yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one thing, like, people talk about dream VR experiences. My dream for VR is we finally get higher resolution screens. I hate the screen door effect
Mhm.
on the, It's like
We're almost there.
it's getting better. Like the crazy part is phone screens are better than like some of the old.
Well, I imagine they could have it, just super expensive, right? That's the problem.
Well, I mean,
4K,
screen technologies and stuff. Those are the kinds of things that get solved way faster than a lot of the other things. And like
Because of
And the
cell phones,
rendering,
though. I mean, that's the
yeah.
whole.
yeah, like
Cell phones push it forward, then they're last gen's tech, but they're still like 20 times better than what we have currently in
Yeah.
other industries, and then they take it away because there's now 10 cents to make one instead
yeah.
of $200.
I want better peripheral. I want higher resolution screens.
Yeah.
Because like the first one I used in that class way back in the day, those were like CRT monitors strapped to your face that were tiny.
Yeah.
So like by the time you were done playing for like 5 minutes, your eyeballs were sweating. It was like it's so much better.
My
than
eyeballs are
sweating.
No, I'm not even joking. It was so hot in that thing.
I don't even know if that's physically possible.
Sweating eyeballs.
All right.
Sweating
Oh, that's what we're talking about, that
You
one.
guys.
Yeah,
Favorite platform to design for?
VR platform, right?
Yeah, favorite VR
Yeah.
platform.
They're kind of all the same now, right?
I'm
kidding.
So having made 6 different tutorials for I Expect You to Die, I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this. Yeah, so let's see. So I when I tell people to buy a VR headset right now, I still tell them to buy an Oculus, mainly because of comfort.
I think it's got the best hand controllers.
The hand controllers are definitely the best.
Those touchpad things.
The headset, like PSVR, and we've got 4 of the Microsoft VR headsets in house,
That's good.
and a lot of them use the Halo just like PSVR. And for me, that gives me a headache after a while. So for whatever reason, like the way the Oculus sits, the Oculus is very light. That said, I love Vive's tracking system because my God, with 2 lighthouses, you can have a ton of things in there, right? So I think that's
Technically,
like.
you have 2 for Oculus, though, for the hands.
What's that?
You got 2 for.
No, but I mean like with 2 lighthouses, you can have
Room
Yeah.
scale.
like not just room scale because you can do room
You
scale.
can do
with
room scale on
Oculus.
Oculus, yeah.
But you could have like 10 head,
Oh, I see
like
what
2
you mean.
head mounts, 3 head
Peripheral,
mounts,
yeah.
and like 5.
Oh.
You could put a tracker on your dog and it's running around there, right? Because
Not
it's
my
all
dog.
just laser light
True.
shooting out.
True.
All the stuff versus Oculus, where it's the cameras can only track so many things, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, though you can only have 2 lighthouses at the time, but. And then PSVR, like PSVR looks fine, it looks
Yeah.
good.
I know, I think
The
it looks
tracking,
horrible.
It looks like-
if they can come
yeah.
up with better tracking,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
not
It's like
7-year-old
playing
hand
N64.
tracking.
The resolution on the
can't do it.
PSVR is DevKit 2.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a-
So it's the
it's
1080p screen. It's half as the resolution.
But
you
they
get twice
upscale
the
and
screen
they do
door
some
effect,
things,
but
and I don't know.
but it's also like half the price, less setup. You already have your PC. Like you don't have to buy
Yeah, they just need
it's
better
a
hands.
recent graphics card. It runs so like
PSVR needs better hands.
easier to get into,
Hands.
but not good to like.
Here's the question:
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to do anything with it? Do you think Sony
PSVR?
has made enough of a splash that they're going to
I mean,
advance the PSVR?
They're
I think
leading
their
the
next
pack.
console.
They,
yeah.
they need a better controller setup.
Yeah,
But
When
I
does
think-
Sony ever ditch tech, UMD, beta,
Apparently-
mini disc?
But apparently never, because they're using the tech from ages ago for their
Yeah.
PSVR.
This is the only time they've stuck with it.
I mean, they held on to mini disc for a long time in Japan, but
Yeah.
like they only stopped making mini disc players like 2 years ago, something crazy like that.
I better buy one real quick.
They are really cool.
The cool thing about the Microsoft VR headsets, and the thing to keep in mind when you're purchasing for them is, so it's inside-out tracking, so the cameras are
There's
in the
no
headset.
lighthouses, right?
What's that?
Are there any lighthouses?
There's no lighthouses, there's no cameras, it's just one HDMI, one USB, and you're good to go.
It works.
And it works really well, and it's really cool because you could like strap your laptop on your back and make a VR, room of this entire floor,
Oh.
and I could just walk around the
Yeah,
entire
it's
place
crazy.
because
I
it's
did not
inside-out
notice.
tracking. And I actually went so far as to get I got a schematic from Chuck. And
Free time, huh?
it was 2D. I had Tyler turn it into an FBX. I loaded that into Unity, but that's as far as I got because then I had to get the Microsoft right now to work. You need Studio. What is it?
Visual Studio.
Visual Studio
Yeah.
2017.
You're programming.
I didn't have a license. I'm not a programmer. I didn't have a license for Visual Studio 2017 for my laptop, so I
You get
couldn't
a Visual
actually
Studio
walk around.
community.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
I
community.
Could
don't
you-
think it has the stuff.
Could you
that
build an
it
EXE
needs.
and push it over?
Wait, is it a?
No, because right now, well,
It's like really hard.
right
to,
now
like,
you
there's
need
no actual way to
to
make it run.
to run a build. You need to run it from Visual Studio.
Oh.
You actually need to hit play on the solution and compile it and run it.
good.
Wait, let's rewind real quick.
Yeah.
We're glossing over the craziest part of this.
What's
You
the
got
crazy-
Chuck to give you the
A
schematics of
blueprint.
the
A
office?
blueprint. Yeah, it was a blueprint. In
Does it have the hole in the floor? Are you going to walk into a hole in the floor?
I don't think
It's
it's
not
what's
in
this
the blueprint.
I don't think it did actually. I would have to add the hole. I would have to add the
You're
hole.
like, oh, I'm gonna go. Sean falls 20 feet.
Wearing a laptop.
Why isn't my VR updated?
Real life Mario Odyssey.
I don't know, but it is, yeah. They all have their strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
and they're just all pushing each other to get better. So I think
It's good, yeah.
Can you use your Oculus controllers with the Microsoft one?
No.
No.
you can't.
No.
That would be key, though, in the
Because
future. If
the
like, we
Microsoft
have more
is
generic
light
controllers.
based. It's not infrared based.
It's
all
visual light based. The one
multi-
downside I will say, like in I Expect You to Die, like if you throw something over your head, and if you do it like fast like that, it works great. But because once you move your hand behind your head,
lose it.
it tries to
Interpret.
compensate with the accelerometer. But if you like hold your hand back there, when you bring it forward again, it'll snap into position. But the no lighthouses and no cameras is really cool, and it works really well. I was very surprised.
Can you put hats on?
Can you put hats on?
Yeah, can you put hats on?
I don't know what that means.
Then I expect you to die. Can you put the hats on in the Microsoft?
Yes, you can put the hats on.
It matters.
No, it does.
That matters, yeah.
You can take them off as well, and using the phone, if you're like a chin holder for your phone, your phone
What's
will
a
drop.
chin holder?
Like how do you
Like
hold a
old school,
handset?
like back when we had
If I
phones.
yeah like I Expect You to Die set in the '60s has a big
Yeah,
phone,
yeah.
one of
You
those.
just- oh, I never thought there's gonna be players who have never held one of those ever.
Oh, yeah.
We
Yeah.
might reach that point where a kid goes in there like, what's that?
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
How do I interact with
that's
that
clearly
phone?
not a phone.
Yeah.
So what is?
What is this thing? You have to knock it off like, that's weird, it has a string.
It's the train intercom. It's not a phone. Don't worry, it's fine. We're covered.
Oh yeah, that's right. You did make it the intercom. That's right.
I mean, it is.
The phone that actually.
Yeah, you get the old crank one. You need to hold this. And...
Yeah, recently we were talking about technology. Was some meme Matt Mahan sent and Mike. It was like, what picture of technology can you show that dates when you were born?
Or just like shows
VHS
Some,
tape.
like some piece of tech that
VHS tape.
You know, yeah.
And I
Traces
loved
through.
yours because I had those. I
Oh,
still
of course,
have one.
yeah.
What
Which
did you?
is the UHF
Yeah.
to RCA. No, UHF to.
It was an RCA. The
Yeah,
video
it was RCA.
It was
Yeah,
RCA.
it was RCA.
Because didn't split out the video and audio. It was all.
Wait.
No, RCA.
Oh, are you talking about the super wide, like,
composite?
like,
It was a box that had the UHF
Yeah.
VHF switch on it, and the
Yeah.
and the
With the
proms that
little
went on the
cords
The
you
two
had
TV.
to
prongs,
screw.
yeah,
Yeah.
those, yeah, those
Yeah.
two, yeah,
Yeah.
classic.
Yeah.
Can you-
That's how you have to hook up Atari.
But then just reminded me of the days when you had dials on your TV, and you
Yeah.
had to like use a screwdriver because the knob
Wait,
eventually
you're-
fell
you're-
off.
you're-
And you went jump.
you, but I didn't know what they were called as a kid. But
Oh yeah, I don't think I've ever seen one of those
Oh.
operational.
So
And one of what operational?
Well, whatever. What you guys?
The
are
converter.
talking
Converter.
about. A converter
It was
from.
a video converter.
Go to
I
our
think I
house.
recognize if I see it, but I don't know the name
Yeah.
offhand.
Sean has one.
I got it in the basement. It's hooked
So
up.
wait, it converts what to what?
Well, it got the signal from your system to the TV, but because the TVs were expecting certain like broadcast
It's
signals,
coming on a UHF antenna.
Yeah.
like you were essentially jacking in a UHF signal into your TV from a
If
wire.
you wanted to connect your NES or your Commodore or
But this was more like
Commodore 64,
Or Atari.
Atari
any
26.
early NES.
to your TV,
Yeah,
Gotcha.
you
yes,
would
that.
use one of these boxes,
Mhm.
Gotcha.
which would take. I still want to say it's composite. It's
You had to
not.
like set your
Not-
TV
yeah.
to 3 to.
Coax.
It was so
See,
why,
my
it's
first
the same
console
wire.
was
Coaxial.
just, my first console was Nintendo, so.
Coax came later.
Yeah, my
but with-
Nintendo was hooked
with
up through
duck
one of
hunt.
these.
What's up?
My Nintendo was hooked up through one of these.
Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe
Depends on the
mine
age of
had
your-
one. I
depends
just
on the
didn't
age of
know.
your TV.
Yeah,
Yeah,
depends
there was
on
there
the
was a
age.
time in which it was just UHFs.
If your
folks,
TV only
and then it
had
was
screw
coax.
inputs.
Yeah, then it went to coax. You probably had a decent TV.
I guess so.
Yeah, like did you ever have a TV with a UHF dial on it?
No.
Yeah, so you didn't.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's just the coax.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was my grandmother's TV with the two dials, one for like the
Yeah.
high numbers and the low numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, one dial went from 2 to 12. Or
Yep.
You had to take the-
Yeah,
you had to take the
went
VHS.
from like 40 to 60.
Yeah, you had to take the regular channels down to the UHF band. because the UHF
Yeah.
band was on a totally different
Right,
set
right,
of
right.
free
Oh,
LEDs.
that's
You
hilarious.
tuned it to UHF and then you'd have a sub dial.
Yeah, there'd be like a
Yeah.
little tuner for the.
And the top one went,
Yeah.
the bottom one went, because it had more,
Right, yeah, it was much
But the
more
dial
friendly.
always fell off. The dial always fell off.
Kids these days won't have to wait for their TV to warm up. We're like,
Yeah.
you can already figure it out in 5 minutes.
Can wait for it to brighten up.
Yeah,
It's okay.
wait for it to warm up.
Colors aren't there
Alright,
yet.
Yeah, sorry, we're getting all.
Yeah.
Oh, they don't care. They
Still
don't.
Are you guys working on any projects that you can talk about? Maybe. What challenges, problems are you currently working on solving? Okay, I like that part.
Yeah. Also, he mentioned Giant Cop. Has anyone played that?
I think I played that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played.
says
Yeah,
we did.
yeah,
Did
the
you
VR
work on
experience.
He's
Giant
in
Cop?
the-
Yeah, like,
He was
Is
here, I
what
think,
he
the last
says?
stream.
Yeah, he
It's
was.
the giant
Yeah, he
cop
mentioned
person.
that.
The giant copper?
One thing on that with that, you did teleporting and then people didn't like it. There's teleporting and then there's like a lot of those tweaks, like the vignette, the timing, the interaction, the position at which they're facing and all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
telegraphing which way they'll be rotating.
Yeah, which way are they facing when they come out of it? Are they like? There's so many different things. So it might have just been that you missed the one thing that like, because a lot of this is so like internal. Like we can't even put into words why we feel motion sick. We just know we do. And then that turns like frame rate. Like you would never say like, oh, I think it dropped 20 frames per second, but like you got motion sick and that's the reason why. But anyway, just to touch on that teleporting.
Yeah,
Maybe
there's
they-
the details of that.
There's so many details in implementation of teleporting that it could be terrible or great. So
I also think the context of the game matters. Like,
True.
I don't know the games about it, I haven't seen it, but
it's
like,
smashing.
if you're-
You could be picking people up.
okay,
You're
well,
like
yeah,
above a city.
You're a giant cop.
you're a
You're
giant.
John
That makes
John
sense.
Makes itself.
Yeah, but I guess like if you had to teleport a lot, that would probably be really annoying. But most games are really good. Like I teleport once or twice, and I'm gonna sit here, and everything comes
Yeah,
to me for
complete
like
an
10
objective,
minutes,
do things. Yeah.
and then I do it. Yeah.
Yeah, frequent teleporting is
I mean, it's an early. There's the lessons that we'll learn in these like 5 to 10 years are the lessons that are going to be taken on to the
Yeah.
future. Like the amount of play testing that Sean and that team did on I Expect to Die for like what would be considered, oh, it's just a room, but like
Yeah.
the amount of putting people through the paces of those things just to make sure that it felt right was the most time-consuming part of that
Yeah.
entire experience, I think.
10 strangers a week or something.
Yeah.
Yep.
AR is similar, where things are like, oh, this obviously is a solution because we're used to seeing it on like a 2D game. You're like, nope, that doesn't work at all. So there's
Yeah, AR is weird.
a lot of trial and error.
It's very strange.
Mhm.
With the challenges on recent projects, so I didn't work on Jedi challenges, but I think that team did an amazing job because
Thanks, man.
no, and honestly, like you want to go in there and everyone's first instinct is
Yeah.
right, and you guys did such a good job with the premonitions, with all the UI things that you guys did to make me feel like a badass with lightsaber instead of lightsaber kid in the
Yeah.
meme, right? Like because I just think that was a huge thing for you
Yeah, I
guys
think
to
it's all-
solve, and you guys nailed it.
That's all Patrick. So kudos to that dude. And,
Well, and your UI.
yeah, I mean that helped. Like the UI. So I'd never worked on a first-person shooter before, right? But so it was interesting to do a game where it's all first-person, and you have to telegraph everything that's happening, right? So like every hit, and Evan did a lot of this work before I jumped on the project, but you have to telegraph. Oh, I got hit from the left, so I'm going to do these streaks coming from the left or the top, just to show like where the blades were coming from. So that way I need to block up this way or things that are out of my view, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just tons of telegraphing, like every possible hit, where it's a light one or a small one, or every angle. We had to do visuals for that stuff. So it's pretty involved for just a health system.
Wasn't it initially you went perpendicular to like the UI indicators? I thought you guys did a lot of revisions on.
I
Like-
didn't see the early versions, like maybe, but I know like having like a health bar, right? Like we did have like one little thing that would appear, like your power-ups appears at the bottom, but having anything that was static, because you're moving around the whole time, and like there's a dude here, so it's like you couldn't stare at a health bar, right? So like, we're doing the classic, like the screen's cracking along the way, but we also need to telegraph that there's like sort of key moments in my health, and so we had different stages that like hopefully people were able to pick up on.
Some testings for it.
Yeah, and then and it ended
Yeah.
up proving out that it worked, and people were liking it, which is sweet, but it took a while to get there.
Did you want to say anything about the challenges you guys hit with Odyssey?
where to start. There were a lot of technical challenges, a lot around like.
Are you gonna explain what Odyssey is?
Yeah. No, I don't think we can.
Yeah, I don't know if you're allowed.
I don't think we can talk about it actually.
We're talking about it. Yeah, we're gonna people up for playtesting and everything.
Yeah, but they have to sign an NDA. Unless they can sign an NDA.
Yeah, well, I mean, so
Well,
you don't.
I won't
you
say
don't go to
exactly
the
what it is.
details. It's a
Yeah.
behavior change app.
Yeah. So we had a lot of. The biggest thing of that challenge with us was that there was a lot of data and there was a lot of information, and getting users around through a lot of written content in a visually interesting way.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest challenges was like we converted basically like 30 pages of just the most mundane content you could ever think of. A company came to us and said, hey, we want to make this interactive and a better thing than just sending out this like 30 page pamphlet to our customers. What can you do? So that challenge converted into a chat-based interface, which was really cool. So we overcome a lot of that by faking a human. So we were able to talk, and so the human would say, hey, did you know about this? And you would be able to answer in layman's terms. You get a couple different options, and be able to say like, okay, no, this is this, and then the chatbot would respond with something, this kind of canned thing, and next thing you know, you just learned 2 pages of information, but you had this really natural 1.5-minute chat that accomplished the same thing, but kept you really involved as well. Yeah, there's 1,000 other things, but they're more technical. Unless you know the rest of it, they won't really add anything to you guys. But no, yeah, I think that was the biggest thing, was trying to get all that content. So chat interface has been showing up all over the place. Even like Verizon's support is now a chat bot for the first like half in like
It's
their
so
app.
annoying.
Yeah.
I dealt with that like last week, and
Yeah.
I kept like wanting to punch my screen.
Yeah, so
You never got to the human?
No, I did eventually. I was
just
persistent.
type
Did you punch the human?
No, yeah, I did. I kept like
Human.
finding all these phone numbers
Human.
and
It's the
stuff.
same thing with like phone systems. You just keep
Yeah.
on jamming
You gotta-
0.
yeah, you gotta
over
hit
and
That's
over.
what
0.
Verizon doesn't let you do
Operator,
that.
please.
You
Yeah,
have to
that
find the
that
right
chat bot
number.
would work.
It's horrible. The future
yeah.
looks bleak. It's gonna be like that.
And then before we jump to Dylan's question, Sean, you have been talking about in the past couple times about how you ported to so many different devices. Were there any challenges that you can talk about, or any problems that you guys had to solve with that?
Sure. I mean, certainly. So it's ironic, right? The version of I Expect You to Die that was the easiest to control was the very first one, where it was just a mouse, because it was like, what do you do with a mouse? You click on what you want. Oh, and then it picks it up. Oh, and look, I can use the scroll wheel. But then, with hands, it was a lot more immersive and hands-on. But we also had we don't have telekinesis, so that required teaching it. And so the biggest thing on the design side from porting I Expect You to Die is like, okay, what control scheme are we going to use with these controllers to get telekinesis to feel good? And so we'd iterate a lot on the tutorial and on what buttons did what and what felt good. It's interesting. So we're working on the Microsoft VR port, and what's like their motion controller for Microsoft VR is basically an Oculus and a Vive controller glued together.
Yeah.
Slightly more ergonomic than that, but so we sort of could pick and choose the best parts of our old control schemes and put them on that. So actually, that went fairly smoothly, which was very nice. But yeah, I don't know. It's just making sure it's intuitive and feels right and doesn't. With the Vive, because the original Vive controller is so large, we would have guests with smaller hands that are like, this is physically painful for me to like. We had reel in and reel out originally as like press up on the touchpad, press down on the touchpad, and that was like painful for people to do if they were also holding the trigger if their hands were smaller. And so we moved to the swipe because that was easier to do. And not only do we support swipe up down, but when we sense a swipe, we decide if you're swiping left, right, or up, down. We pick whatever one it is. So you can actually reel in and out by swiping left, right, or by swiping up, down. And so sort of finding that control scheme took a while. I think, like the immediate team, we were like at a loss. And then someone played it and they were like, why don't you try swipe? And we tried it and it was great. One of the other people was Schell here. But yeah.
Cool.
All these different controllers, man. A lot of different controllers out there.
So, do you want to talk about 2 more peripherals?
2 or more.
This looks like your Jam Week project. I don't know if you want to talk about
Oh,
your Jam
yeah.
Week project, but I think that would be the perfect answer to this because it's kind of awesome.
Oh, interesting.
Real quick, to answer the second part, like
Yeah.
the Jackbox part, right?
Mm-hmm.
While you're formulating what you want to say.
Yeah, yeah, please.
The key to that game, I think, is the barrier of entry.
Yeah.
Right? Like everybody
come with a
has
controller in
phone,
your
right?
pocket.
Like you're not asking them to get anything new. Even there's a bunch of games that came out after it that are the same thing, but they require an app download. Even that stops people from interacting with it. Like the fact that you just say, "Hey, open it, go to this URL," is
Yeah.
the key to the success of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping that barrier of entry as low as possible.
Yeah, especially for like non-gamer types, right?
Oh, and
Which is
that's what
typically
that's
who
for.
this is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
And
web-based
beer,
all
man.
over. You just, if you have a web browser, you can play that game.
Well, and so for last year's Global Game Jam, I did an Air Console game. And Air Console is this thing, their whole thing is the PC is the host, and everyone else's controllers are their phones in a web browser. And like the whole game, what's that?
What's it called?
airconsole.com, and it's free. You can you can use it right now.
They had a
It
jam
supports.
earlier this summer. I was going to enter.
Did they really?
Yeah, it was like, we'll give you whatever X amount of money. You
Oh, I
can
should
develop
have
for our platform.
submitted.
Yeah, you should have.
SeanPenn.com/shirts. It's an Air Console game on there. It's really popular game. It's blown up, and but yeah, no. So I think mobile phone plus PC. Yeah, we did a prototype here of mobile phone plus VR recently. That was very fun.
That was cool.
The networking. So any game you add networking to, automatically it's
Yeah.
like 4 times more work. At least anytime you have multiple platforms, it's like at least another 2 or 3 times. So you're looking at like 8 to 15 times more work to make this happen. But man, it is fun to have mobile plus VR if you can do it for real. But that was just a prototype. Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's one of the pack-in games. It was the Japanese PSVR pack-in where it's like,
Hacking?
yeah, like they had like the demo games where it wasn't like a.
Oh, like in the.
Yeah.
Pack it
I
in.
was thinking,
Hacking.
okay, got
Yeah,
it.
that was like a game called
No.
Hacking.
Yeah.
It where like one person wears the headset and they're either like Godzilla or they're a giant mouse, and then the other people have the controllers and they're
Yes.
like the little people, and so it's like one person is trying to paw or smash the little people, and then the other people with controllers are running around, and it's a good blending of, again, it's like, I feel like it's a good entry game because like one person buys the expensive PSVR and then other people can have their controllers, and it's
Yeah.
kind of like it's a great marketing thing to be like, hey, this is so fun, so if you had a headset, I could go to your place, and
Well, that gives something. Well, I was gonna say, it gives something to do for people who are watching you, right? Because like that's like
Yeah,
always
exactly.
the VR experience. Like
Yeah,
you're
VR
watching
is
the screen.
it's still very isolating if you have people over to your house.
Yep.
And that's the first thing you want to do is you want to show it off, and everybody wants to play it. But then there's, if you have 4 people over, 1 person's sitting there, 3 people are sitting on the couch watching this static thing. Hopefully you've set it up so that they can see it on the TV.
Right.
If you don't have that much, like, or even audio or any of that stuff, like, there's just, you're just sitting there, you're just like,
That is a
okay,
boring
so-
house
yeah,
party.
Yeah, and somebody's just like going around having a blast, but,
It's like Switch commercials.
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I think the Switch is actually really good for this too because I guess the peripherals come in pre-packaged, right?
Yeah.
And it's 1 controller, but it's also 2 controllers.
They can turn it into
Yeah.
2 or 3.
And then if
yeah.
you have 2 switches, it's already 4 controllers. So.
Yeah.
When you're heading onto your rooftop New York City apartment parties.
Your hipster
and-
party.
It's funny because people are laughing at the commercial, and then the first time they kind of switched wasn't like in a party setting. They're like, darn it.
Yeah, no, I've literally seen that scene. Maybe not on a rooftop, but definitely at a party. Like,
Yeah.
In that, $2.5 million New York apartment.
oh man.
But yeah, I think that, multiple peripherals with, I think the most compelling one for me right now is like bringing people into like experiences, less barrier of entry, and being able to play with people in VR is like your game jam was really cool for that fact. Like it was basic, but at the same time, like we were like 5 or 6 people were interacting with like there was almost limitless a number of people if everybody put them on their phones. Like the entire studio could be battling against this one person in VR, and that thought is really awesome. Especially if you networked it to multiplayer, you could be multiple VR headsets, but then like X
Yeah.
number of people in other homes. I mean, obviously the tech side of that is a lot to develop,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, for
the
sure.
theory, is.
I mean, yeah,
super
you know,
cool.
turns out playing games with other humans is really fun, and so if you can make that work well, and the
Yeah.
interesting thing is, so I spent a bunch of time in network just VR chat worlds when we first got the Microsoft hardware. I was just, you know, hey, here's a free, you know, I was looking for free things to try out Microsoft VR with, and one of them, terrible because I've forgotten it. I think it's just like VSpace. I want to call it VSpace.
Maybe VR space.
No, I think it was just VSpace. Anyway, it was like a VR chat program, right? So I hop in there, you know, and I'm like, you know, checking out, you know, I make an avatar, and everyone's very. I don't know if it's because VR still has a small install base, or because it's like it's so realistic to be
Yeah.
next to someone.
very personal.
Everyone was very polite. I was very happy, and I was like, I was chatting with, with people in, he was in Denmark, and another guy was in Brazil, and another person in Germany. He was a student, and we're all just hanging out around this virtual campfire story.
That's weird.
And the guy from Denmark is like, let's play the capital game, and I'm like, capital game? He's like, yeah, you just, you know, someone says a country and you say the capital of that country. And I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna get dominated by all these Europeans because I'm a stupid American who doesn't get anything. But I held my own. I forgot some, but I held my own. And it was just like, you know, I was in there maybe half an hour chatting with these like random people, and they were all on Gear VR. They were all on Gear VR.
That's fun. Cross
And I
platform.
was the only one. Yeah,
Interesting.
it was very interesting.
I think we need more of that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Cross-platform, because each install
It's so
the
low.
install base is so small, right? If you want to sort of
There's a
get
game
the-
on Steam that does that, the multiplayer. It's just like a bunch of mini games. I know that's not descriptive at all. But it was the weirdest thing because I got an Oculus earlier this year, and so I jumped in and I was just looking, like everybody does, looking for free games to just just try out instantly.
Yeah.
And I walked into this one not knowing what it was, jumped in, and all of a sudden other people were talking. I assumed it was canned,
Yeah.
and then it turns out they were actually humans, and they were facing me. And then I was talking, but they could hear me because the
Yeah.
Oculus has a mic on board.
Yeah.
So like I forgot that I had a mic on board. I forgot all this stuff was happening, and it was a really weird emotion to feel like all of a sudden like they were in my space because your
Yeah.
brain is considering yourself in this world, and all of a sudden there's other people in this world, and you, like I felt really vulnerable sitting in my living room all of a sudden. But once I
Right.
it was like the weirdest emotion to feel. I was like, I feel like I want to take this off. Like I feel like you're in my space.
Yeah,
But then
why
I
are you in my living room?
Yeah,
You
why are
were
you
here
in my living room?
later,
Get
yeah?
out here. But then I was like, my brain like caught up. Yeah, my brain caught up, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm like in this space. And so I started talking. But it was a really cool and I experienced the same politeness, and it's
Yeah.
really weird. I think it's because like you don't have that anonymity you would have like on a YouTube like chat.
Yeah.
Like these guys could start like saying all this crap to us,
Yeah,
and
don't
I
do it.
couldn't do anything.
Don't do it.
Please
Don't.
don't.
You could.
But it is. It's
I
very
never
strange.
really connected that until you said that. Like that makes more sense because like the same reason I felt like they were in my space, the same reason they are unwilling to be me because they feel like they're also there.
Yeah, I'm
It's a really interesting.
I'm vaguely or cautiously optimistic that I mean I know there's it's like higher risk, higher, you know, right? Because it's like, man, you can really mess with people more in VR.
Yeah.
And like traumatically so, right? But like also, there's a lot of the social norms that keep 90% of us good people in the real world. They're VR too, right? So it's like
I mean, it was
What's gonna happen is Tinder
95.
VR.
What's that?
Tinder VR.
Well, that's, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get that app. I'm not gonna get that app. I don't care if it's free. I'm not.
Has anyone made? I would love to play like a VR Clue. Like I'd love to see how that
interesting.
works. Like when there's like a tone of accusation of like.
I love like people.
You're at a dinner party and one of you. Yeah.
Are you the
Who did
werewolf?
it?
in
Yeah,
VR?
werewolf,
Like
yeah.
you just play Mafia or something in VR.
You're just
I
like,
think someone did
cool.
make that game. I think someone did for PS4.
Yeah, because it makes. I mean, it
Yeah.
totally makes sense. Like
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You can actually make. Yeah, it's.
No, they did make that game. My friend said it was really cool actually.
Yeah.
Because there's like a real werewolf, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, what you learn.
You're like,
It's
oh,
like a
there.
real werewolf.
You just like werewolf games. I think that's the thing about that.
But in VR space with Clue, it'd be cool to be like piecing together the puzzle of like, there's the knife, and then did they do that? But they're in
Yeah.
this room, and then you actually like are talking to them and hear their voice when they're like, no, I didn't do it,
Yeah.
and you don't know if they're lying. And
The pacing this is the facial.
Yeah, the space
interaction
for
side.
improv
Yeah.
Bringing
Yeah.
like this,
Yeah.
like I'm not like in a game you're taking on a role, but like you're still separated so much
Yeah.
by that role.
Mhm.
But like imagine like playing something like LA Noire or
yeah.
something like that where you're like I feel like I'm more embodying this character.
Yeah.
Like
The only thing is we're missing is the facial tracking.
Yeah.
If you had the facial, that would be the final piece for things like that, because that all of that like poker's played on.
I
your
think
face,
they're working
like,
on that, man.
Yeah.
I've heard some
They are.
rumors of that stuff.
I was at the Unite conference and there was this guy who was really about all of that stuff. He like bought every single prototype thing. I think I talked about this. I talked about it at some point
Palmer
here.
Luckey of facial tracking.
Pretty much. He hacked together all this stuff, but it's all really like terrible because it's super prototypey. But it was really compelling. He used a Vive because like you said, you could have like X number of peripherals.
Yeah.
So he attached like things to his knees, his feet, his elbows, his everything. So he had full like body tracking, and he works for some company that makes a big MMO, and then he attached eye tracking. The eye tracking was kind of funny. It could only work in one eye at a time. So it worked, but it was like, I want to track the left eye now, and you click, okay, left eye tracking, and then click right eye tracking. So it was really weird, but it knew where you were looking, so it tracked your iris. So the
Whoa.
actual VR, this stuff exists today and will exist in the future at some point, but he had his mouth tracking, he was able to like puff up his cheeks, and that tracked, like that was all animated, so he could actually have like, if the model was better, it would have been super compelling. Like all of the rigging components, the bones and structure and the tracking, all of that stuff is going to be there eventually. But like, it was cool
Yeah.
because I know what it would take to get that last 20%. Like I could fill in the gaps with my brain. But if anybody else saw that, they'd be like, that's such a terrible experience.
Right.
But it was super cool to see like somebody's even trying to do it.
In the VR seminal classic Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, of course, what made the Black Sun so popular was Juanita's facial tracking.
Spoilers, man.
It's in the first like couple chapters.
Is it before or after the cool dude on the motorcycle?
Okay.
I hate that book.
It is literally my favorite book, so
I know. I read it because of I think that was a book club here.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
good.
man. See, Baron asked, how many different teams do you have working on projects at the studio? So the average is about 10 to 12 projects at a time. As we get bigger projects, that will decrease because obviously the team size would be a little bit bigger. Sometimes we have teams that are on very short projects, your 2-3 month projects, and then you have projects with as long as almost a year, right?
Yeah, over a year.
No, maybe.
We've had
Odyssey
2
was
years,
2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
From phase
Yeah.
1 to
Oh,
phase
yeah.
4. We had 4
Happy Adams
phases on that project.
too.
Happy Adams was long. Yeah. So about the average is 10 to 12 projects at a time. So we're big studios, so we're able to handle all the diversity of the projects that come through. So it's good to have.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like you're on an indie team. Like
Yeah.
that's the vibe I get. It's like tight group of people, and
Yeah.
you're kind of sort of in control of your own destiny a little bit. It's nice.
Small teams.
Yeah, the structure, it's not, a lot of other studios are structured where you're just a grunt, basically, where like you have a very special skill set and that's your job and that's what you do every single day. But our teams are more structured like you are an artist, so you can do X number of artist things, or if you're a programmer, you're doing a bunch of different things. Yeah, like each team is small, but you're not like, I'm just the guy who pumps out textures, or I'm the guy who just pumps out rigs. Like, we do have some specialized places. Rigs was a bad example, but for the rest of it, yeah, like the structure is small, but like specialized, but more generalized in a way too. Yeah,
There's such a
I think it's really
variation of projects as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like you might be on one thing that's completely 3D and game-esque, and then things like what I worked on, Odyssey, is literally an app. It's a 2D user interface app, and the problems are completely different. Your tasks are completely different. I don't know, there's a lot of variation.
You get to learn a lot of random skills.
Sure.
Like we're on Happy Adams, like Yotam has a chemistry background, so like every day I was learning something about chemistry, like, which is cool. Came away with some knowledge, and now 2 years later I forgot it.
Classic.
I feel like it's pretty common in the games industry though, like the
Yeah.
varied backgrounds. Like there's probably there's a lot more schools now where you go to school like to learn that. But like I said, we have people that have architecture degrees, you have people that have chemistry degrees, you have like
Writing.
they're all over the place, and like I feel like that's one of the key parts of
I think that's what's
Games
nice about
industry.
the ETC though, right? Because it is a lot of people that came from not necessarily gaming backgrounds, you know, so yeah, like the architecture and chemistry and stuff.
Pretty cool.
Cool. All right. Well, see, Baron asked, what's everyone's dream project? We're all
It's all
we're
about
dreaming
that
today.
dreams.
A lot of
Yeah.
dreams today that you would do if you had free reign and minimal constraints.
Unique constraints, man.
What's up?
Unique
Yeah.
constraints.
I don't like no
Yeah.
constraints.
You don't have none, you have minimal.
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 Pick your minimal.
You need lots of, you need maximal constraints.
Maximum constraints.
Max.
Seriously. Like a
I
straight
freeze like a deer in headlights when
Yeah.
I have too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
When
freedom.
anything
Too much
is possible.
Not
Look
gonna
at
do anything. Don't
Beyond
do
Good and Evil 2. Michael Ansel's got free reign, minimal constraints, and the game's been in development for it's coming up on 10 years. With nothing, it barely has a vertical slice.
I know at least for me,
It'll be great in another 10 years.
I feel like I work very much in like a jam context where it's like I don't really know what I'm gonna make until I need to make it, and then I start making stuff that I'm like, oh, I don't know even know how I came up with this. Yeah, so it's hard to say.
Like what's the dream? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why I like.
It's a hard
I-
question.
I really envy my T back here because like you come up with an idea and you're like, I'm gonna make that. Like you just like.
Yeah, this guy's got more Kickstarters under his belt than I'm like how many have you done? You've done like counting the music in the games, like.
Maybe 5 or 6.
No, more than that.
No, it's not more than that.
I was gonna say a dozen.
No, it's definitely not a dozen.
They're like
I don't know.
But
Dozen-
5 or 6
every-
is still
every
a
time
lot.
Five or six is still a lot of successful Kickstarters.
Yeah, every time I check my email from Mike T, so I made a thing. What do you did?
I didn't sleep last night and I made a thing.
My dream project would be making tiny arcade games that no one would ever play.
And he
for the rest
does
of my
it.
life.
But he does it.
And,
He's living a dream.
Living a dream.
Constraints are that I have to sleep sometimes.
Minimal.
Minimal.
Minimal sleep. When your wife and your doctor say, dude, you gotta sleep.
Yeah, then I take a
So you see, Baron, we need constraints here. So
Constraints are good.
yeah,
They are.
yeah,
They are.
constraints are not a bad thing.
I'd like to make a good VR horror game. I think.
Like a VR.
It's like I've yet to play a sweet one that I'm like super immersed, terrified.
Yeah.
Like want to be in a horror movie, like Until Dawn kind of thing, but VR. You know, live it. And
There was
make
one
the-
that just came out recently. I haven't played it, so I can't say anything about it. But
The
Look it
H.P.
up.
Lovecraft one, the doc where they're in the hospital. I saw Conan played that.
maybe, yeah, I think that was it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So
The
which one?
Supermassive
Yeah.
team.
Conan O'Brien coming?
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
yeah. That one looked pretty good because
It
that was
did look bad.
that felt like a almost like an what is it, Outcast or no?
Yeah, kinda,
It
yeah.
felt like an Outcast but in VR, which was
Yeah.
really cool.
I agree. I want to do the same, but I want to do like the original Night of the Living Dead, where like you have no strength, you have no weapons, so it's actually like barring
Yeah.
the door,
Yeah,
it's
that'd
like
be
standing in the
awesome.
bedroom. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's actually scary. It's not like, oh, I'm Superman and I can smash
Okay.
everyone.
Why? Why? Can I ask you guys why?
It's too scary.
It's to be fun.
I'm into haunted houses, man. I like to push my limits.
I don't know. Hear you about your haunted house stuff. That's
I know.
You
You know the
like-
basement? You ever heard of the basement?
No.
no,
You ever been to the basement?
The
Like-
basement?
you're
The
like
basement?
next level
The
stuff.
basement.
I don't know. I don't know.
I'm not
I've been
down
to
with
a
that.
basement.
I'm not with the
A
basement.
VR.
I've been to my basement.
Yeah, it's the basement. I've been there too.
VR Exorcist mixed with Paranormal Activity,
Yeah,
where
VR.
you're called to a house and then have to like cure it.
Yeah.
That would be so scary.
Like it's like you're pushing
Nope.
yourself, right? Like, can I get through this? It's like it's not a thing that I experience with those games. You know,
Huh.
like Resident Evil 7. I had to take
Awesome.
breaks.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had to turn the lights on and like
Yep.
check.
Because it was terrifying.
It's
Yep.
so scary.
Well, you're just hanging on a doorway for like a half hour. Just like looking out into the hall, like,
Yeah.
nope, not yet.
The old lady with the lantern, like that. I was
Oh,
like,
dude,
nope,
that's awful.
nope,
So the
I'm
key,
out.
the best game for you would be VR Dark Hallway.
Yeah, just hanging out. Whistling to myself.
Or VR PT, like that demo.
Oh,
I don't even know if I
incredible.
can do it. I don't know if I could.
I don't
That
want
would be
synchronuses in my VR experiences though.
Yeah.
What is VRPT?
Have you seen PT?
It was the Silent
Silent
Hill
Google it,
demo.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Silent Hill playable trailer PT.
It
Terrifying.
is terrifying.
That's such a shame.
And you're
I
just
didn't
walking
do
down a
that.
hallway.
Yeah.
Like I
It's
screamed.
a looping hallway. The
Scared other
design is
people around.
good. The art was really good.
It's
Yeah.
Guillermo
Yeah.
del Toro did that.
Yeah.
Wow. Fascinating.
And then they broke up.
Yeah, I know.
So,
It's
so it
such
got
a shame.
canceled. Yeah.
All right.
But
Any
not
game?
That,
Oh, I'm
like,
sorry.
like not that. I really would like to see and work on some like AR, VR, tabletop type stuff,
Mhm.
like augmented
Yeah.
tabletop experiences.
Yeah.
I think that'd be just a blast to work on.
Yeah, I think that's huge potential for like board games. Like we were talking earlier, but like yeah, like I play Warhammer and I love that game, but it's like it's 5 hours and I literally have a headache by the end because you're crunching so many numbers. It's like I don't want to do that. Just show me this stuff, you know?
You know, this
So
is
that'd be
essentially
nice.
what, like, if you look at it, right, this is why things like StarCraft were popular and Warcraft, because they took those things and they
Mhm.
simplified them
Simplified
for
it,
you. But I'd love to see the, like, the big thing about those kinds of games, especially miniatures games, is, like, being able to modify and, like, customize your game so much. And people do it with, like, paints, but, like, being able to, like, go into that space, knowing I'm not going to screw up my little mini because I painted it badly. I can be like, oh wait, I screwed it up, let me try again. Or like, oh, let me do a new skin. Doing the old, like, Forza. Is it Forza that does, like, they have the whole, like, online marketplace of people's different designs and, like, being able to look through them.
No.
Just sounds like it'd be really cool.
That'd be cool. Yeah, like I want your Warhammer set or like your
Yeah.
thing, and then poof, like yeah.
Oh, and like Warhammer, like people are so crazy they want to simulate the battle, right? They'll get
Yeah.
like cotton and like burn it or spray paint it black and put like a light inside, so it looks like something's on fire. It's like just do that in AR, much simpler and more immersive.
All right, well, looks like it might be a good one to try to wrap up. Any games you guys are particularly enjoying at the? Oh, we talked about this at the
Yeah.
very beginning, but what do you guys plan on playing later? So you can talk about Christmas break.
I got some minis coming up. I'm not proud to say that out loud, but
Hey man,
I gotta do my thing, you know.
You go into your dark hallways.
Yep,
you
yep.
Gotta do what you gotta
Don't
do.
do this both at the
Finish
same
it before
time.
they
No,
come
no,
out
no.
all the way.
I'm gonna
Terrible
play
minis.
Rise on Xbox One because on How Long to
Oh,
Beat
Rise.
it says
Oh.
it's 5.5 hours.
The original like
The CryEngine,
the
yeah.
Crytek thing.
Which I'm a little conflicted because I think that was one of the games where they were having financial difficulties and they
Yeah, that
held
basically
payment.
bankrupted them because it wasn't as successful as.
Yeah, I hate
they
hearing
were
games
hoping.
that got finished with people not getting paid.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate, but it supposedly it's awesome and very cinematic, and
Yeah.
those are my type of
Is
games.
it the Kinect?
No.
What is that?
It's just the like gladiator.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're like a Roman soldier,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah,
whole
the
point was like
Crisis
this was
team.
proving next generation graphics. It was built in
That's right,
Crytek,
yeah.
but like yeah.
Or wait, was it?
Or
Was it
CryEngine.
the Diac team? Was it the Silicon Knights? Did they do it,
mm-mm.
No.
or was it Crytek?
I think it was Crytek themselves.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I said it earlier, but I'm going to be playing Wolfenstein because it's all narrative based. That is so far really awesome. It's like playing a book, and I don't say that very often. But it's playing a book without having to like Fallout and Skyrim kind of feel like you're playing a book, but there's like 10 hours of things between each narrative line, and instead you're playing an FPS with like 10 minutes before the next line of your characters and progression. It's like watching a TV show or reading a book. So I'm going to be playing through Wolfenstein throughout. Yeah.
Did you play the first one?
I'm not. This is my
Well-
first Wolfenstein, beyond touching really old ones.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
picking those
yeah.
up. Yeah.
Okay.
The first one's good.
I
The
said it
first
like-
one? Or
Really?
the first one? Because
No,
that
no, I
was
mean the
awesome
first
when I was-
redo, the
when I was
most
Yeah,
a
no,
kid.
yeah,
first
yeah,
new
yeah.
one
Amazing.
recently,
Yeah.
but
The like new gen.
I had the
like,
shareware of the first one, but yeah.
yeah,
Model 386?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nope.
Dan, any games you're playing over Christmas break? you think?
Let's see. I'm probably gonna play more Splatoon 2. Anything lined up? I was planning on playing Hypesoft. That was that Kickstarter game from the MS Paint Adventures guy. It was about a comics guy, but I haven't gotten to that yet. I'll get to that eventually. Anything else? I'll probably be playing a lot of party games. Usually over break, I end up playing a lot of like Codenames or
yeah.
Werewolf or Avalon, wherever. Like with friends. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
River?
Finish Assassin's Creed Origin and probably pick up some old Assassin's Creed series. But I mean, I played them a bunch many years ago, but I feel like I have to replay them. Yeah, that's my plan.
Playing like Pink.
Oh, next up for me is
Meowst.
going to be besides
He's working.
I'm looking at a game that I plan to play when I finally have some downtime, which will be over the break. That's called Splinter Zone. It's sort of like a Mega Man type game. Looks like super hard, super retro.
Cool.
Looks cool. Been waiting to check it out. So
What's that on?
it's on Steam and itch.io.
I'm
I'm hoping to finish Breath of the Wild. And when I finish that, I'd like to move on and
I might play that.
finish Nier. I've been
Yeah,
wanting,
it's
I've been
awesome.
wanting to get that
How
done.
was that?
Hmm?
How was that?
It's pretty awesome so far. Like, I just like the world. It's like it's kind of like off-putting in a way that is kind of neat. I don't know. Well, I hear there's a really cool like you play through and then like you learn a lot and you kind of like keep doing it to get different aspects. I don't know. That's why I want to play it. I'm kind of like trying to keep myself away from what exactly happens because I hear a big part of that is playing through it like multiple times.
I'm bummed it was popular because I was banking on like an early price break to get it, but it's been like almost full
There was a
price.
sale like 2 months ago, and I'm like, I'm gonna get it now because like I felt like it was getting enough buzz that might not go too much lower.
Yeah, just as we were ending, we couldn't escape this question. Please bring free new DLC. I Expect You Die. This game is a lot of fun.
Excellent. We're always working on I Expect You to Die stuff. It's a favorite of ours, and so we're not quite sure what it is yet, but rest assured we're always working on I Expect You to Die stuff. That's all I'm gonna say.
Can we port it to Torque?
Yeah, we will continue to port it to everything under the sun, putting it to the
Virtual boy.
yeah, virtual boy.
The Wonder Swan.
Ooh, that would be a heck of a port.
Oh, cool. Any closing thoughts?
Dinner was good.
Yeah. Thank you, Boston Market.
We're expecting our
brought to
checks
us by-
Yeah. And
thanks
so,
for joining.
if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe so you get the updates whenever we go live and all that fun stuff. Our next Dinner with the Devs is December 14th. Where we'll actually have a little contest. Those who will be coming will be building gingerbread houses, and the audience will get to choose who makes the best one, and we get to destroy all the others. So, all wearing ugly Christmas, ugly sweaters. So it should be a fun one in December. December 14th. Thank you guys very much. Have a good one.
See ya.
Peace.
Alright. I can't figure out how to turn it off.
That was that awkward moment where I'm still alive, like,
Yeah, we're just